The gunshot echoed through the canyon just as Zelda Jenkins reached for the last strip of venison hanging in the smokehouse. Her stomach twisted with hunger so fierce, she barely registered the sound of boots crunching through pine needles behind her. "You got about 3 seconds to explain yourself before I decide whether to hand you over to the sheriff or deal with this my own way." A deep voice rumbled from somewhere behind her shoulder, sending ice water through her veins despite the warm Montana summer evening of 1876. Zelda spun around, her thin fingers still clutching the dried meat, and found herself staring at what had to be the largest man she had ever seen in her 21 years of existence. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the setting sun that filtered through the smokehouse doorway. Dark hair fell past his collar, slightly wavy and touched with hints of auburn where the light caught it. His arms, bare beneath rolled-up sleeves, corded with muscle that spoke of years spent hauling traps, chopping wood, and surviving in the wilderness surrounding Fort Benton. His jaw was square and dusted with several days of stubble, and his eyes, a startling shade of green, watched her with an intensity that made her want to simultaneously run and explain everything all at once. "I'm sorry," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry, My brothers, they're hungry and our supplies ran out 3 days ago, and I didn't know what else to do." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had cried enough over the past month to last a lifetime. The mountain man, Quinn Fitzgerald as she would later learn, studied her face for a long moment. His expression shifted from stern suspicion to something softer as he took in her appearance properly. She was thin, too thin, with hollows beneath her cheekbones that spoke of too many missed meals. Her dress, once a decent calico print, was patched at the elbows and hem, clean but worn threadbare in places. Her hair, dark as a raven's wing, had been pinned up hastily, with several strands escaping to frame her dirt-smudged face. But it was her eyes that held his attention. They were the color of warm honey, and despite the fear in them, they held a fierce determination that intrigued him. "How many brothers?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had been moments before. "3," Zelda answered. "Tommy is 8, Jacob is 10, and Samuel just turned 12 last week." She swallowed hard. "Our parents died in March. Fever took them both within 2 days of each other. We've been trying to manage on our own, but winter was hard on the supplies they left us, and I haven't been able to find steady work in town. Some of the shopkeepers, they don't trust a woman on her own to manage things properly, so they won't hire me even though I can read and write better than most." Quinn's jaw tightened. He knew exactly which shopkeepers she meant. Fort Benton had its share of good people, but it also had plenty who looked down on anyone they deemed beneath them. A young woman trying to raise 3 boys alone would definitely fall into that category for some of the more narrow-minded residents. "Put that down," he said, gesturing to the venison in her hand. When her face fell and fresh tears threatened, he quickly added, "I'm not taking it from you. I'm going to pack you up a proper supply. Can't have kids going hungry in my territory." Zelda blinked, certain she had misheard him. "What?" Quinn was already moving past her, pulling down strips of venison, smoked rabbit, and even some of his precious stores of dried fish he'd put up from the spring run. He found a burlap sack hanging on a nail and began filling it with steady, efficient movements. "You got a root cellar at your place?" "Yes, but it's nearly empty except for a few withered potatoes and some preserves that are probably going bad." He added more meat to the sack, then reached for a second bag and started filling it with other supplies. Dried beans from a barrel, some cornmeal from a sealed tin that kept the mice out, even a small package of salt wrapped in oilcloth. "Where's your place?" About 3 miles west near Willow Creek. There's a small cabin. My father built it when we first came to Montana Territory 5 years ago. Zelda watched in amazement as he continued packing supplies. Sir, I can't possibly pay you back for all this. Didn't ask you to, Quinn replied. He tied both sacks securely and hefted them like they weighed nothing, which she knew they certainly did not. It's getting dark. I'll walk you home and meet these brothers of yours. That's not necessary. I know the way, and I've already taken enough of your time and your provisions. Quinn fixed her with a look that was both stern and amused. Miss, there are wolves in these woods, not to mention the occasional bear coming down from the high country looking for easy meals. You think I'm going to let you walk 3 miles through that in the near dark carrying heavy supplies? I was raised better than that, even if I do prefer living away from town. The walk back to her cabin was quiet at first. Zelda led the way along a well-worn path that wound through stands of lodgepole pine and Douglas fir. The evening air filled with the sounds of birds settling in for the night and the distant rush of Willow Creek over its rocky bed. Quinn followed a few paces behind, his long strides eating up the distance easily despite the weight of the supply sacks. I really am sorry for stealing, Zelda said after they had walked for nearly a mile. I was raised to respect other people's property, but I was desperate. The boys haven't had proper protein in over a week. I've been feeding them what I can forage, but it's not enough for growing children. How have you been managing at all? Quinn asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. I take in mending when I can get it. Some of the ranchers' wives will hire me to help with their washing or their gardens, but it's not steady work and it doesn't pay much. I've been trying to stretch our supplies, teaching the boys to fish and set snares, but I'm not very good at it. My father never taught me those things. He always assumed he would be around to provide. Her voice caught on the last word. Quinn heard the pain in it. Losing parents is hard at any age. I lost mine when I was younger than your oldest brother. Different circumstances, but the result is the same. You feel like you're lost at sea without a compass. Yes, Zelda breathed, relieved to have someone understand. Exactly like that. Every decision feels impossible, and I'm terrified I'm going to make the wrong choice and hurt the boys somehow. The fact that you care that much tells me you're probably doing better than you think, Quinn said. Bad guardians don't worry about whether they're doing right by their children. They walked in companionable silence for a while longer. Zelda found herself stealing glances at the man behind her. He moved through the forest with a quiet confidence that spoke of years spent in the wilderness. His footfalls were nearly silent despite his size, and his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, alert for any danger. She felt safer with him near than she had in months, and that realization brought its own complicated feelings. She had spent the past few months learning to depend only on herself, and now here was this stranger, this mountain man who had every right to be angry with her, showing her more kindness than most of Fort Benton's upstanding citizens had managed. Why do you live out here alone? She asked before she could stop herself. I'm sorry, that's too personal. It's all right, Quinn said. I spent some years in the Army serving out of Fort Ellis, saw things, did things that made me realize I needed some peace and quiet. Found this stretch of wilderness 5 years ago and built my cabin. I trap in the winter, sell the furs in spring, hunt and fish the rest of the year, trade with some of the local tribes who pass through. It suits me. Don't you get lonely? Quinn considered the question. Sometimes. But I go into Fort Benton when I need human company. Play cards at the saloon, trade supplies at the general store, attend church on occasion, though I'm not sure the preacher approves of my irregular attendance. It's enough for me, or it has been anyway. Something in the way he added that last part made Zelda's heart skip strangely, but she pushed the feeling aside. They were approaching her family's cabin now, and she could see lamplight glowing in the window. One of the boys must have lit it when dusk began falling. The cabin was small, just 2 rooms with a loft where the boys slept. The logs were chinked well enough, though some spots would need attention before winter. A small vegetable garden struggled along one side, the plants looking thin and struggling despite obvious care. Chickens roosted in a small coop nearby, and Zelda could hear their soft clucking as they settled for the night. The door flew open before they reached it, and 3 boys tumbled out, their faces anxious until they spotted their sister. The oldest, Samuel, had the same dark hair as Zelda and was already showing signs of the height he would likely reach. Jacob was stockier, with lighter brown hair and freckles across his nose. Little Tommy brought up the rear, all gangly limbs and worried brown eyes. "Zelda, you were gone so long we thought something happened," Samuel said, then stopped short when he caught sight of Quinn towering behind his sister, arms full of supply sacks. "It's all right," Zelda said quickly, seeing the fear flash across her brothers' faces. "This is Mr. Fitzgerald. He's helping us. I'll explain everything, but first let's get these supplies inside before the mosquitoes eat us alive." The boys stepped back, and Quinn followed Zelda into the cabin. The interior was neat and clean despite being sparsely furnished. A table with 4 mismatched chairs occupied the center of the main room. A cookstove sat against one wall with a battered pot hanging above it. Shelves held a few dishes and cups. A rocking chair that had seen better days sat near the fireplace, and Zelda's mending basket rested beside it, overflowing with work. A small curtained area in the corner held what Quinn assumed was Zelda's sleeping space. Quinn set the supply sacks on the table and began unpacking them. The boy's eyes grew wider with each item he pulled out. When the smoked venison emerged, little Tommy actually gasped. "Is that real meat?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "Sure is," Quinn said, his heart twisting at the hunger in the child's face. "Your sister and I thought you boys might appreciate a proper meal tonight. I was at Mr. Fitzgerald's place without permission," Zelda said carefully, choosing her words to be honest without frightening her brothers. "But he was kind enough to share some supplies with us anyway. We owe him a great debt." "You don't owe me anything," Quinn said firmly, "but I would appreciate the chance to get to know you folks a bit better. Would you object to me stopping by now and then to check on you all?" Zelda looked at him, surprise evident on her face. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I've got more supplies than one man needs, and you've got children who need looking after. Seems like a practical arrangement to me. Besides," he added, looking at the boys, "I could use some help around my place. I've been meaning to expand my smokehouse and build a better storage shed before winter. If your sister agrees, maybe you boys could come help me a few days a week. I'd pay fair wages, and you could learn some skills that will serve you well out here." Samuel straightened up, trying to look older than his 12 years. "I'm a hard worker, sir. So is Jacob. We'd be glad to help." Quinn smiled, the expression transforming his rugged face into something warmer and more approachable. "I believe you are. We'll start next week if that suits everyone." Zelda felt overwhelmed by the sudden turn her evening had taken. She had left the cabin hours ago, desperate and frightened, prepared to steal to feed her family. Now she was standing in her home with a mountain man who was offering not just charity but actual paid work for her brothers. It seemed too good to be true, which made her cautious. "Mr. Fitzgerald," she began. "Quinn," he interrupted. "If we're going to be neighbors of a sort, might as well use first names." "Quinn," she corrected, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "This is very generous, but I need to know what you expect in return. Nothing in this world comes free, and I won't have my brothers put in any danger or questionable situations." Quinn respected her caution. Any woman with sense would be suspicious of a strange man offering help. "Fair question. What I expect is exactly what I said. The boys help me with some projects, and I pay them honest wages. Maybe once in a while your family joins me for Sunday dinner because I'm tired of eating alone. That's all. No hidden motives, no strings attached. I know what it's like to struggle, and I know what it's like to need help and not have anywhere to turn. If I can make things a little easier for you all, I'd like to." Zelda studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. She found none, just an open honesty that made something in her chest loosen. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you, truly thank you." The boys were already examining the supplies with barely contained excitement. Quinn showed them how to store the meat properly, and explained how long each item should last if they were careful. He found himself enjoying their eager questions and the way they hung on his every word. It had been a long time since he had been around children, and he had forgotten how refreshing their enthusiasm could be. "I should head back before it gets full dark," Quinn said eventually. "Zelda, would you walk me out?" They stepped outside together, leaving the boys to chatter excitedly about the unexpected bounty. The sun had fully set now, and stars were beginning to appear in the deepening blue of the sky. The air had cooled, bringing with it the fresh scent of pine and the distant creek. "I meant what I said in there," Quinn told her, his voice low enough that the boys would not hear through the open window. "I'll come by in a few days to collect the boys for work, and I'll make sure they're fed while they're with me. But I want you to know, if you ever need anything at all, my cabin is due east of here, straight through those trees. There's a trail, not much of one, but you can follow it. You're welcome any time." "Why are you doing this?" Zelda asked, needing to understand. "You don't know us." "I tried to rob you. Most men would have dragged me to the sheriff." Quinn was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I saw my mother struggle after my father died. She was proud, didn't want to accept help from anyone. She worked herself to exhaustion trying to provide for us. When the fever came through our town, she didn't have the strength left to fight it. I was 14 when she died, and I've always wondered if things might have been different if she had let someone help her. I can't change the past, but I can make sure another woman doesn't have to carry that burden alone." Tears did fall then, streaming down Zelda's cheeks before she could stop them. Quinn pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, surprisingly clean, and handed it to her. "I've been so scared," she whispered. "Every day I wake up terrified that I'm going to fail them, that something will happen and I won't be able to protect them or feed them or keep them safe. It's been crushing me." "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," Quinn said gently. "Let me help. Let your neighbors help if they offer. There's no shame in accepting a hand when you need it." Zelda wiped her eyes and nodded. "I will. Thank you, Quinn. I don't know how I'll ever repay this kindness. Just take care of those boys and yourself. That's payment enough." He tipped his hat to her, a gesture that seemed oddly formal given the intimacy of their conversation. "I'll see you in a few days." Zelda watched him disappear into the darkness, his footsteps fading until all she could hear was the wind in the pines and the creek's constant murmur. She stood there for a long moment, the handkerchief still clutched in her hand, and felt something shift inside her. For the first time since her parents died, she felt a glimmer of hope. True to his word, Quinn appeared 3 days later just after dawn. Zelda was in the garden trying to coax life into her struggling plants when she heard his approach. This time he arrived with a pack horse loaded with supplies and a friendly smile that made her heart do that strange skipping thing again. "Morning," he called out. "Thought I'd collect the boys if they're ready to work." Samuel, Jacob, and Tommy tumbled out of the cabin, eager and nervous in equal measure. Quinn spent a few minutes talking with them, explaining what the day's work would entail and making sure they understood his expectations. Then he surprised Zelda by pulling a package from his saddlebag. "These are for you," he said, handing her several small cloth bags. "Vegetable seeds. Your garden looks like it could use some help. The growing season is still long enough to get a decent crop if you plant soon." There are instructions in each bag about spacing and watering. Zelda accepted them with wonder. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll have dinner with me when I bring the boys back tonight. I'm making stew, and I'd appreciate the company." Quinn's green eyes held hers, and she found herself nodding before she fully processed the invitation. The boys left with Quinn, chattering excitedly about the adventure ahead. Zelda watched them go, her protective instincts warring with her practical knowledge that this opportunity was exactly what her family needed. She forced herself to trust Quinn's word and turned her attention to the garden and the seeds he had gifted her. That evening, Quinn returned with 3 exhausted but happy boys. They were dirty, sweaty, and talking over each other in their eagerness to tell Zelda everything they had learned. Quinn had taught them how to measure and cut wood properly, how to use various tools safely, and had even let them help plan the layout of his new storage shed. More importantly, he had treated them with respect and patience, never losing his temper even when they made mistakes. "Go clean up," Zelda told her brothers, laughing at their enthusiasm. "And then you can tell me every detail over supper." "Actually," Quinn interjected, "I was hoping you would all join me at my place for that stew I mentioned. I made plenty, and it seems a shame to let it go to waste." The boys immediately began begging, and Zelda found she did not have the heart to refuse them. Besides, she was curious to see Quinn's home and learn more about this complicated man who had walked into their lives so unexpectedly. Quinn's cabin was larger than she expected, well built and situated in a clearing that offered views of the surrounding mountains. The smokehouse, where she had first encountered him, stood to one side, and she could see the beginnings of the new storage shed the boys had mentioned. A good-sized vegetable garden flourished behind the cabin, and a small barn housed his horses and mule. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. The main room featured a stone fireplace with a thick bearskin rug spread before it. Handmade furniture, clearly crafted with care, filled the space. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that surprised Zelda. She had not expected a mountain man to be a reader. "You like books," she observed, moving closer to examine the titles. "One of my few indulgences," Quinn admitted. "I have to order them from back east, but it's worth it. Long winters get lonely, and a good story helps pass the time." Zelda ran her fingers along the spines, recognizing some titles and discovering new ones. "I used to read all the time before." She trailed off, not wanting to dampen the mood. "Borrow any you like," Quinn offered. "I'd be glad to know someone else was enjoying them." Dinner was a warm, lively affair. Quinn's stew was hearty and delicious, thick with meat and vegetables. He served it with fresh biscuits that Tommy declared the best thing he had ever tasted. The boys regaled Zelda with more stories from their day, and Quinn added his own observations, praising their hard work and quick learning. Zelda found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. Quinn was easy to talk to with a quiet humor that snuck up on you. He drew her out, asking about her life before Montana, her parents, her hopes for the future. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about her father's dreams of starting fresh in the territories, about her mother's gentle nature and her love of music. "She played the piano beautifully," Zelda said softly. "We had to leave it behind when we came west." It was too expensive and impractical to transport, but sometimes I can still hear her playing in my memory. Music is a powerful thing, Quinn agreed. I've got a harmonica somewhere around here. Not much, but sometimes I play it in the evenings. Would you play something now? Tommy asked, his young face eager. Quinn hesitated, then nodded. He retrieved the harmonica from a shelf and began to play. The melody was simple but sweet, a folk tune that spoke of home and longing. Zelda watched his fingers move over the instrument and felt her throat tighten with emotion. There was something achingly lonely about the sound, despite its beauty. When the song ended, the cabin fell silent except for the crackling fire. Quinn set the harmonica aside, looking almost embarrassed. "That was beautiful," Zelda said quietly. "Truly." The evening ended too soon, with Quinn insisting on walking them home despite their protests that they knew the way. Under the stars, with the boys running ahead on the trail, Quinn and Zelda fell into step beside each other. "Thank you for today," Zelda said. "For everything. The boys needed this. They needed to feel useful and capable again." "They are useful and capable," Quinn replied. "They're good boys, Zelda. You've done well with them. I've been terrified I'm failing them. Fear is normal when you love something enough to lose. But don't let it blind you to what you're accomplishing. Those boys are fed, clothed, and clearly loved. That's what matters." They walked in silence for a moment before Zelda found the courage to ask, "Will you really keep hiring them? This wasn't just a kind gesture that will fade away." Quinn stopped walking and turned to face her. In the moonlight, his features were all planes and shadows, his eyes dark and serious. "I don't make promises I can't keep. The boys have worked with me as long as they want it. And you, Zelda Jenkins, you have a friend in me for as long as you need one." Something in the way he said her name made her shiver despite the warm night air. "I think I'd like that," she whispered. The days turned into weeks, and a pattern emerged. The boys worked with Quinn 3 days a week, learning skills and earning wages that Zelda carefully saved. On Sundays, they all shared dinner together, alternating between the 2 cabins. Quinn began teaching Samuel to shoot properly, the boy being old enough now to handle a rifle safely. He taught Jacob and Tommy to fish using techniques that actually caught something, unlike Zelda's fumbling attempts. He repaired things around their cabin without being asked, fixing a sagging porch step here, patching a weak spot in the roof there. For her part, Zelda found herself looking forward to Quinn's visits with an anticipation that went beyond gratitude. She noticed things about him she had not at first. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle patience he showed her brothers, the quiet competence with which he approached every task, the way he listened when she talked, really listened, as if her words mattered to him. She began leaving little touches around his cabin when they visited. Wildflowers in a jar on his table, fresh biscuits wrapped in cloth and left in his kitchen, a neatly patched shirt returned better than it had been. Quinn noticed each gesture, and his smiles grew warmer, lingering longer when they landed on her. One August evening, after a Sunday dinner at Quinn's cabin, the boys fell asleep on his bearskin rug, exhausted from a day of fishing at the creek. Zelda and Quinn sat on his porch, watching the sun paint the mountains gold and crimson. "They are comfortable here," Zelda observed, gesturing toward the sleeping children visible through the open door. "Good," Quinn said. "I want them to feel this is a safe place. They adore you. They talk about you constantly during the week, about what Quinn said or what Quinn taught them. Samuel has started walking like you, copying your stride." She laughed softly. "I think you have become something of a hero to them." Quinn shifted uncomfortably. "I'm no hero, just a man trying to do right." "That is what makes you one," Zelda said quietly. She turned to look at him, taking in his profile against the sunset. "Can I ask you something personal, Always. Why haven't you married? A man like you with all this, she gestured at his property. Surely women in town must have shown interest. Quinn was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Finally, he said, I suppose I was waiting for the right person. Someone who understood this life, who wouldn't try to change me or expect me to be something I am not. Someone who could love the wilderness as much as I do. He paused, then added softly, someone like you. Zelda's breath caught. Quinn. I know it's probably too soon to say something like that, he continued, finally turning to meet her eyes. And I know you have enough to manage without adding complicated feelings to the mix. But I promised myself I would always be honest with you, Zelda. The truth is, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that first night. The way you were so fierce and scared and brave all at once. The way you put your family before everything, even your pride. The way you laugh at Tommy's jokes and the gentle way you correct Samuel when he gets too big for his britches. I admire you more than I can properly express. Zelda felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were not from sorrow or fear. I think about you constantly too, she admitted. I tell myself it is just gratitude, that I am confused because you have been so kind to us. But it is more than that. When you are near, I feel safer, happier. The world seems less overwhelming. I find myself wanting to share every small thing with you, to hear your thoughts on everything from the weather to the books I borrow from your shelf. Quinn reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his much larger one. His palm was calloused from work but warm and steady. What do we do about this? I don't know, Zelda whispered. I'm terrified of making a mistake, of letting my judgment be clouded by need or loneliness. The boys depend on me to make good decisions. Then we take it slow, Quinn said. We continue as we have been, spending time together, getting to know each other better. There's no rush, Zelda. I'm not going anywhere and I don't expect anything from you except honestly. When you are ready, if you are ever ready for something more, I'll be here. And if you decide you only want friendship, I'll respect that too. Relief flooded through her. Thank you. Thank you for understanding. They sat together as darkness fell, hands linked, watching the stars emerge one by one. Inside, the boys slept peacefully, and Zelda felt something she had not experienced since before her parents died. Contentment. Whatever the future held, she was not facing it alone anymore. September brought cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color to the mountains. The boys continued working with Quinn. Their initial wages now supplemented by food stores Quinn helped them put up for winter. He taught them to smoke meat properly, to preserve vegetables, to prepare their home for the harsh months ahead. Zelda watched her brothers grow stronger and more confident under his tutelage, and her heart swelled with gratitude and something deeper. Her own relationship with Quinn deepened in quiet, subtle ways. He began staying after he brought the boys home, helping her with evening chores and lingering over coffee at her table. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to practical matters to shared memories. Zelda borrowed books from his collection, and they discussed them at length, sometimes agreeing, sometimes debating good-naturedly. Quinn brought her a repaired rocking chair one evening, the wood newly sanded and oiled until it gleamed. I noticed your old one was wobbly, he explained, seeming almost shy about the gift. Zelda ran her hands over the smooth wood, touched beyond words. It's perfect, thank you. He also began teaching her practical skills she needed. How to shoot a rifle properly so she could protect her family if necessary. How to field dress game if she managed to hunt successfully. How to recognize different plants and which ones were useful for food or medicine. Zelda proved an apt student, her earlier fumbling attempts born more from lack of knowledge than lack of ability. One late September afternoon, Zelda arrived at Quinn's cabin alone. The boys were at a neighbor's ranch, helping with harvest work Quinn had arranged for them, and would not be back until evening. She had told herself she was just returning the book she had borrowed. But in truth, she had wanted an excuse to see Quinn without the constant presence of her brothers. Quinn looked surprised but pleased when he opened his door to find her standing there. "This is unexpected. Everything all right?" "Everything is fine," Zelda assured him. "I just thought, since the boys are occupied, perhaps you might like some help with your own preparations for winter. I'm decent at canning if you have vegetables that need putting up." Quinn's face split into a genuine smile. "I'd appreciate that. Come in." They worked together in his kitchen, falling into an easy rhythm. Quinn prepared the vegetables while Zelda heated the canning jars and monitored the water bath. They talked as they worked, the conversation flowing naturally. "You ever miss civilization?" Zelda asked at one point. "Theater and restaurants and all the things a city offers." Quinn considered the question. "Sometimes I miss the convenience, but I've never been comfortable in crowds. Too many people, too much noise. Out here I can hear myself think. I can breathe." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Zelda agreed. "I thought I would hate the isolation when we first came to Montana. I was young, used to neighbors close by and social gatherings. But there's a peace here I never found in Missouri. A rightness, as if this is where I was always meant to be." "I feel that way too," Quinn said quietly. "Even more so lately." Their eyes met across the kitchen, and the air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. Zelda set down the ladle she had been holding and wiped her hands on her apron. "Quinn, I need to tell you something." He went still, his expression carefully neutral. "All right. I've been thinking about what you said last month, about taking things slowly and being honest." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I don't want to take things slowly anymore. I mean, I do not want to rush into anything foolish, but I also don't want to waste time pretending I don't feel what I feel. I care about you, Quinn, deeply. When I'm with you, I'm the best version of myself. You make me laugh, you make me think, you make me feel safe enough to be vulnerable. I haven't felt that way since my parents were alive." Quinn crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides and took her hands in his. "Zelda Jenkins, I have been half in love with you since the night I found you stealing from my smokehouse. Watching you these past months, seeing your strength and your tenderness and your fierce determination, I've fallen the rest of the way. I love you. I love your stubbornness and your pride and the way you snort when you laugh really hard. I love how you braid Tommy's hair when he asks, and how you let Samuel pretend to be more grown up than he is. I love that you read with your finger tracing the lines and that you hum while you cook." Tears streamed down Zelda's face, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I love your gentleness with my brothers and your patience when teaching them. I love how you never make me feel weak for needing help. I love your quiet strength and your terrible jokes and the way you look at the mountains like they are old friends. I love you, Quinn Fitzgerald." Quinn cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "May I kiss you, please?" she whispered. When his lips met hers, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Then Zelda's hands came up to grip his shoulders, and Quinn pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of longing and promise and hope for the future. They broke apart eventually, both breathless. Quinn rested his forehead against hers, a smile playing at his lips. "Well, that was worth waiting for." Zelda laughed, the sound joyous and free. "Indeed it was." They kissed again, less tentatively this time, and might have continued indefinitely if the pot on the stove had not boiled over, sending water hissing across the hot surface. They sprang apart, laughing, and rushed to salvage their canning project. "We should probably maintain some level of propriety," Zelda said, though her flushed cheeks and bright eyes suggested she would not have minded more kissing. "At least until we figure out how to explain this to the boys." "Fair point," Quinn agreed. "Though I don't think they will be terribly surprised. Samuel cornered me last week and asked what my intentions toward you were. Apparently, he has noticed me mooning over you like a lovesick fool." Zelda's eyes widened. "He didn't." "He absolutely did. I told him I intended to court you properly and would ask for your permission before doing anything that might affect your family." He seemed satisfied with that answer. "My little brother interrogated you about courting me," Zelda said wonderingly. "That's either mortifying or touching. I cannot decide which." "I found it touching," Quinn admitted. "He loves you fiercely and wants to protect you. I respect that." They finished the canning project, though it took longer than necessary as they kept stopping to steal kisses and whisper endearments. By the time the boys were due back, they had several dozen jars of preserved vegetables cooling on Quinn's counter and plans to make their courtship official. That evening, after dinner at Zelda's cabin, Quinn asked to speak to all 4 siblings together. The boys gathered around the table, looking curious and slightly nervous. Quinn cleared his throat, suddenly feeling more anxious than he had facing down hostile soldiers or angry bears. "I wanted to talk to you all because you are a family, and what I'm about to ask affects all of you, not just your sister." He looked at each boy in turn, then let his gaze settle on Zelda. "I would like permission to formally court Zelda. My intentions are entirely honorable. I care for her deeply, and I care for all of you. If she accepts, I hope that eventually, if things progress as I believe they will, we might all become a family." Tommy's face lit up immediately. "Does that mean you would live with us? Or we might live with Quinn?" Zelda interjected gently. "We haven't discussed specifics. This is just about courtship right now." Jacob, ever practical, asked, "Would we still get to work with you and learn stuff?" "Absolutely," Quinn assured him. "That wouldn't change regardless of what happens between your sister and me." Samuel, the oldest and most serious, studied Quinn for a long moment. "You will take care of her, make sure she is happy and safe, with everything I have," Quinn promised. "Your sister is the most remarkable woman I have ever met. I would count myself blessed to spend my life making sure she has everything she needs and deserves." Samuel nodded slowly, then surprised everyone by standing and extending his hand to Quinn. "Then you have my blessing. Our parents would have liked you, I think." "Father always said a man's worth is shown in his actions, not his words. You have shown yourself worthy." Quinn shook the boy's hand solemnly, moved by the maturity and trust in the gesture. Tommy and Jacob added their enthusiastic approval, and then all eyes turned to Zelda. "I accept your courtship," she said formally, though her eyes danced with happiness. "I would be honored to be courted by you, Quinn Fitzgerald." The boys cheered, and Tommy immediately started planning what he called the wedding feast, despite everyone's protests that they were getting ahead of themselves. The evening ended with laughter and joy, and when Quinn left that night, he pulled Zelda aside for one more kiss, hidden in the shadows of the porch. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Happier than I have been in a very long time," she replied. The courtship that followed was both proper and sweet. Quinn came calling 3 evenings a week, bringing small gifts and spending time with the whole family. He and Zelda stole moments alone when they could, walking by the creek or sitting on the porch after the boys went to bed, talking and dreaming about the future. Quinn met Zelda's few friends in Fort Benton, enduring their scrutiny with good humor. Zelda, in turn, met Quinn's trading partners and the few neighbors he counted as friends. The local preacher, Reverend Martin, seemed particularly pleased by their courtship and not so subtly hinted that he would be available to perform a wedding ceremony whenever they were ready. October arrived with a blaze of gold and crimson in the aspens. Quinn took Zelda on a proper courting outing, just the two of them, with the boys staying at a neighboring ranch. They rode up into the mountains to a meadow Quinn knew, where wildflowers still bloomed despite the cooling temperatures. They spread a blanket and shared the picnic Zelda had packed, talking and laughing as the horses grazed nearby. After they ate, Quinn pulled her close, and they lay back on the blanket, watching clouds drift across the brilliant blue sky. "I want to marry you," Quinn said abruptly. "I know we have only been courting officially for a few weeks, but I have known since that first night that you were meant to be mine and I yours. I don't need more time to be certain, but I will wait as long as you need." Zelda turned on her side to face him, her expression serious. "I don't need more time either. I know what I want, and it's you. It's this, a life built together, raising the boys and maybe adding to our family someday if we are blessed. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. I want to be your wife, Quinn." Quinn rolled to face her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Truly, you will marry me?" "Yes," Zelda said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." He kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and promise into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, Quinn reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth bag. From it, he extracted a ring, simple but beautiful, with a small sapphire set in silver. "It was my grandmother's," he explained, taking Zelda's hand. "The only thing I have from my family before. I want you to have it if you will." Zelda's breath caught as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the blue stone catching the sunlight. "It's beautiful. I'll treasure it always." They stayed in the meadow until the sun began its descent, talking about practical matters now. Where they would live, how to combine their households, when to hold the wedding. They decided Quinn's cabin was larger and more secure, so Zelda and the boys would move there after the wedding. They set the date for early November, giving them time to prepare but not so long that winter weather might interfere. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of activity. The boys helped Quinn build additional sleeping space in his cabin, constructing a room off the main area that would be perfect for the three of them. Zelda and Quinn, with help from the neighboring women once word of the engagement spread, prepared for the wedding. It would be a simple affair, held in Fort Benton's small church, followed by a celebration at Quinn's cabin. Zelda also made a decision that had been weighing on her mind. She sought out Quinn one evening and found him in his workshop, carving what would become the headboard for their marriage bed. "Can we talk?" she asked from the doorway. Quinn immediately set down his tools. "Always. What's on your mind?" Zelda stepped into the workshop, running her fingers along the smooth wood he had been carving. "I want to talk about the boys. After we are married, I want you to consider formally adopting them, if they agree. I know they still remember our parents and always will. But you have become a father to them in all the ways that matter. I think it would mean everything to them to know that bond is legal and permanent." Quinn's hands stilled on the carving. "You would want that. You trust me that much with them?" "I trust you with my whole heart," Zelda said firmly. "You have proven yourself 100 times over. Those boys love you, Quinn. And I think it would give them security, knowing they truly belong to our family without question." Quinn pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I would be honored beyond words. We will talk to them together, make sure they understand and want it too. But yes, Zelda, I want that more than I can say." The conversation with the boys happened a few days later. To no one's surprise, all three were enthusiastic about the idea. Tommy actually cried happy tears, clinging to Quinn and calling him Pa for the first time. Even Samuel, usually so careful with his emotions, looked misty-eyed as he agreed. "Our parents would want this," Samuel said quietly. "They would want us to have a father who loves us and protects us. They would be happy we found you." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the first snow of the season dusting the mountain peaks. Zelda woke in her cabin for the last time, her brothers already up and dressed in their best clothes. The women from neighboring ranches arrived to help her prepare, bringing wildflowers they had preserved for the occasion, and a dress that had been altered to fit her perfectly. As Zelda looked at herself in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the radiant woman staring back, she thought of her parents. She wished desperately they could be there to see this day, to know that she and the boys were thriving, that they had found love and security despite everything. But she felt their presence somehow, as if they were watching and approving of the man she had chosen. The ceremony itself was simple and beautiful. Reverend Martin presided, his weathered face creased with genuine happiness. The small church was packed with Quinn's friends and trading partners, neighbors from the surrounding ranches, and even some of the townspeople who had once looked down on Zelda's struggles. Samuel walked Zelda down the aisle, his young face solemn with the responsibility. Quinn waited at the altar, looking almost overwhelmed when he caught sight of his bride. He wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, his beard freshly groomed. But it was the expression in his eyes that made Zelda's heart soar. Pure, unconditional love shone there, along with wonder that she was truly about to become his wife. The vows were traditional, but when Quinn spoke his promises, his voice rang with conviction that left no one doubting his sincerity. Zelda's own vows were equally heartfelt, her voice only wavering slightly when she promised to love him all the days of her life. When Reverend Martin pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn cupped Zelda's face tenderly and kissed her with a sweetness that made several of the watching women sigh. The congregation erupted in applause and the boys whooped with joy. The celebration at Quinn's cabin, now truly their family home, lasted well into the evening. Neighbors brought food and drink, someone produced a fiddle, and dancing spilled out onto the porch and into the yard. Quinn danced with his new wife, then with each of his soon-to-be adopted sons, making them beam with pride. Zelda found herself passed from partner to partner, laughing and breathless, overwhelmed by the community's warmth. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, calling out well wishes and congratulations, Quinn and Zelda stood together on their porch, watching the last wagon disappear down the trail. The boys had been tucked into their new room, exhausted and happy. "Alone at last," Quinn murmured, pulling Zelda close. "Are you happy?" Zelda asked, even though she could see the answer in his face. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Quinn replied. "I spent so many years alone, content but always feeling like something was missing. And then you stumbled into my life, trying to steal meat from my smokehouse, and everything changed. You brought light and love and laughter into my existence. You and those boys, you are everything I never knew I needed. You saved us," Zelda said softly. "Not just with food and supplies, though that was critical. You saved us from despair. You gave the boys a father and a future. You gave me hope and partnership and love. I cannot imagine what our lives would be like now if you had reacted differently that night, if you had been cruel or reported me to the sheriff." "I like to think fate brought you to my door," Quinn said. "That somehow we were always meant to find each other, no matter how circuitous the path." They stood together in the cold November night, wrapped in each other's arms, and looked up at the stars scattered across the vast Montana sky. Inside their warm cabin, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the wilderness stretched in all directions, beautiful and harsh and home. "Take me inside, husband," Zelda whispered. "I want to begin our marriage properly." Quinn swept her into his arms, making her gasp and giggle, and carried her over the threshold of their bedroom. The door closed softly behind them, and the cabin settled into peaceful silence broken only by the crackling of the dying fire and the whisper of wind through the pines. The winter that followed was harsh, with heavy snows and temperatures that plunged well below freezing. But inside the Fitzgerald cabin, warmth and love prevailed. Quinn and Zelda settled into married life with surprising ease, their partnership strengthened by shared work and genuine affection. The boys thrived under Quinn's continued guidance, growing stronger and more skilled with each passing week. In January, Quinn and Zelda traveled to Fort Benton to finalize the adoption of Samuel, Jacob, and Tommy. The process was simple, facilitated by Reverend Martin's testimony and the obvious devotion between Quinn and his sons. When the papers were signed and filed, making the adoption legal and binding, all 5 members of the Fitzgerald family celebrated with dinner at Fort Benton's best restaurant. "To family," Quinn toasted, raising his glass. "Blood or chosen, what matters is love." "To family," everyone echoed, and Zelda felt her heart might burst with joy. Spring arrived eventually, as it always did, bringing with it mud and melt and the first hints of new life. Zelda discovered she was pregnant in April, the baby due to arrive near the end of the year. Quinn's reaction when she told him was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then immediately apologized and set her down carefully, worried he had been too rough. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Zelda laughed. "But I appreciate the concern." The boys were equally thrilled at the prospect of a new sibling. They immediately began debating names and arguing over who would get to teach the baby various skills. Quinn expanded the cabin again, building another room that would serve as a nursery initially and become a bedroom as the child grew. Summer brought long, golden days filled with work and laughter. Zelda's garden flourished, providing vegetables they canned and stored for the next winter. Quinn's trapping and hunting kept them well supplied with meat. The boys worked alongside their father, learning and growing, their bond strengthening with each shared task. Neighbors came to visit more frequently now, drawn by the Fitzgerald family's obvious happiness and Quinn's increasing openness to community. Zelda hosted dinners and sewing circles, finding friendship and support among the other ranch women. Quinn participated in community barn raisings, and even agreed to serve on the school board when Fort Benton finally raised enough money to build a proper schoolhouse. As Zelda's pregnancy advanced, Quinn became increasingly protective, insisting she rest more and take on fewer heavy chores. She tolerated his hovering with amused patience, knowing it came from love and his lingering fear of loss. "I'm perfectly healthy," she assured him one evening in late November, resting her hands on her rounded belly. "Women have been having babies since the dawn of time. We are remarkably resilient." "I know," Quinn said, kneeling beside her chair and placing his large hand over hers. "But you are my entire world, Zelda. If anything happened to you, I don't know what I would do." "Nothing is going to happen," Zelda said firmly. "I have a skilled midwife, a warm home, plenty of food, and a husband who loves me. Those are better conditions than most women have. I'm going to be fine, and so is our baby." Their daughter arrived during the first week of December, during a heavy snowstorm that kept the midwife at their cabin for 2 days. The labor was long and difficult, and Quinn paced the main room like a caged animal, alternately praying and cursing himself for putting Zelda through this ordeal. But when he finally heard the baby's cry, strong and indignant, and the midwife called him into the bedroom, every moment of worry evaporated. Zelda lay exhausted but radiant, cradling a red-faced, dark-haired infant wrapped in soft blankets. "Meet your daughter," Zelda said softly. Quinn approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peering up at him with unfocused eyes. Something in his chest cracked open, flooding him with a love so intense it was almost painful. "She's perfect," he whispered. "You're perfect. Thank you, Zelda. Thank you for this gift." They named her Clara Rose Fitzgerald, and she became the darling of the entire household. The boys were devoted to their baby sister, taking turns holding her and arguing over who got to help with her care. Quinn proved surprisingly adept with the infant, his large hands amazingly gentle as he changed diapers and walked the floor with her during fussy nights. As winter deepened and the family spent long evenings by the fire, Quinn often reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. Just over a year ago, he had been alone, content but isolated, going through the motions of survival without truly living. Now his cabin rang with children's laughter and his bed was warmed by a wife he adored. He had purpose beyond mere existence, a family that needed him and loved him in return. One evening, with Clara sleeping in her cradle and the boys upstairs in their room, Quinn and Zelda sat together in the rocking chair he had repaired for her, Zelda on his lap despite her protests that she was too heavy. "You remember the night we met?" Quinn asked, stroking her hair. "How could I forget? I was terrified you would drag me to jail or worse." "I was angry at first," Quinn admitted, "protective of my supplies, my territory. But then I really looked at you, saw the desperation and the fierce love for your brothers, and something in me just knew. This woman, she is going to change everything." "Did you really?" Zelda asked, surprised. "You knew even then?" "Some part of me did, yes. The rest figured it out pretty quickly after." He tightened his arms around her. "Best thing that ever happened to me, you stealing from my smokehouse." Zelda laughed softly. "I prefer to think of it as borrowing without permission. Call it what you want, it brought you to me. I'd have gladly emptied my entire smokehouse for that." They rocked together in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, their daughter breathing softly nearby, their son safe upstairs. Outside, snow fell steadily, blanketing the world in peaceful white. Inside, the Fitzgerald family was warm, well-fed, and wrapped in love. The years that followed brought their share of challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, illnesses that had to be weathered and accidents that required tending. Quinn broke his arm one spring, and Zelda nursed him back to health with patient determination. Samuel, at 15, fell in love with a rancher's daughter and had his heart broken, requiring hours of fatherly wisdom from Quinn. Jacob developed a talent for working with horses and began training them for neighbors. Tommy showed aptitude for learning and announced his intention to become a teacher someday. Through it all, Quinn and Zelda's love remained the foundation on which their family was built. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, mourned losses, and rejoiced in victories. They expanded their home again when a second daughter, Margaret Jane, arrived 2 years after Clara. Then came a son, Daniel Quinn, completing their family. As the children grew, so did the community around them. Fort Benton expanded, gaining more businesses and eventually a railroad connection. The wilderness that Quinn loved was gradually tamed, though enough remained wild to satisfy his soul. He and Zelda became respected members of the community, known for their generosity and their devotion to family. Samuel married at 19. Bringing his bride to live on land Quinn helped him claim adjacent to the family property. Jacob followed suit at 21, marrying a woman he met while delivering horses to a ranch near Helena. Tommy pursued his education, becoming the teacher he dreamed of being, and eventually married a widow with 2 children of her own. Clara, wild and headstrong like her mother, fell in love with a young surveyor passing through Montana. After a whirlwind courtship that nearly gave Quinn heart failure, she married and moved to Colorado, though she returned often to visit. Margaret chose to stay closer to home, marrying a local rancher and settling within easy riding distance. Daniel, the baby, showed signs of following in his father's footsteps, loving the wilderness and the solitary beauty of mountain life. Through all these changes, Quinn and Zelda remained constants for each other and their extended family. Their cabin became the gathering place for holidays and celebrations, filled with children and grandchildren, noise and laughter and love. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Zelda back to the meadow where he had proposed. They were older now, with silver threading through their hair and lines etched by weather and laughter around their eyes, but the love between them burned as brightly as ever. 20 years, Zelda marveled, looking at the familiar landscape. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like forever. Best 20 years of my life, Quinn said. Every day with you has been a gift, Zelda. Even the hard days, the scary days, I wouldn't trade a single one because they were ours, experienced together. Do you ever regret it? Taking on a desperate woman and her 3 hungry brothers, you could have had a much simpler life. Quinn pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. Simple is overrated. You gave me everything that matters. Love, family, purpose, joy. I was existing before you, just going through the motions. You taught me how to truly live. We saved each other, Zelda said quietly. I was drowning in fear and responsibility, convinced I would fail the boys, fail my parents' memory. You threw me a lifeline and then pulled me to shore. More than that, you stood beside me and taught me I was stronger than I knew. They stayed in the meadow until sunset, talking about their children and grandchildren, making plans for the future, reminiscing about the past. As they rode back toward home, their horses moving side by side down the familiar trail, Quinn reached over and took Zelda's hand. I love you, he said simply. Today, tomorrow, always. Always, Zelda agreed, squeezing his hand. The cabin came into view, smoke rising from the chimney, light glowing golden in the windows. They could see figures moving inside, their children and grandchildren gathered for the anniversary celebration. The sound of laughter drifted out to greet them. Quinn helped Zelda dismount and pulled her into his arms for a long, sweet kiss before they went inside to join their family. 20 years ago, he had found a desperate young woman stealing from his smokehouse. He had filled her arms with supplies and walked her safely home. In doing so, he had found his home, his heart, his reason for being, as they stepped into their warm, noisy, love-filled cabin. Surrounded by the family they had built together, Quinn sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. He had been given everything he never knew he needed, all because of one cold evening and a brave woman's desperate act. The story that began with theft had become a love story for the ages, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the most unexpected places, and that kindness and compassion can change not just lives but entire destinies. Years continued to pass with the reliable rhythm of seasons in Montana. Quinn and Zelda grew older gracefully, their love deepening with each shared sunrise and sunset. The cabin that had once housed just one solitary mountain man had expanded over the years, with additions and modifications to accommodate their growing family and the frequent visits from children and grandchildren. Quinn's hair went completely silver, though he remained strong and vital well into his 60s, still chopping his own wood and checking his trap lines in winter. Zelda's dark hair silvered too, and laugh lines deepened around her honey-colored eyes, but Quinn insisted she grew more beautiful with each passing year. They settled into comfortable routines, these rhythms as familiar and comforting as the mountains themselves. Morning coffee on the porch, watching the sun paint the peaks gold. Working side by side in the garden that had grown from Zelda's struggling first attempt into a thriving source of food and beauty. Evening walks along the creek, hands linked, talking about their day and their family. Nights in their bedroom, sometimes making love with the practiced tenderness of long partnership, sometimes simply holding each other and feeling grateful for another day together. Their grandchildren adored them, begging for stories about the old days and the wild Montana territory of their youth. Quinn would tell tales of his time in the Army, his early days as a mountain man, the characters he had encountered in Fort Benton's rough and tumble years. Zelda would share memories of Missouri, of the journey west, of those frightening months after her parents died when she did not know how she would survive. "Tell us again how you met Grandpa," Clara's oldest daughter, Rose, would beg during visits. Zelda would smile and exchange glances with Quinn before beginning the story. She never told it exactly the same way twice, sometimes emphasizing different details, but the core remained constant. The desperate act of stealing, Quinn's unexpected compassion, the walk home through the woods, the beginning of everything. "Your grandmother was the bravest person I'd ever met," Quinn always added. Terrified but willing to do whatever necessary to protect her family. That kind of courage, it's rare and precious. "And your grandfather was the kindest man I'd ever met," Zelda would continue. "He saw past my desperation to the person underneath. He offered help without judgment, without expecting anything in return. He saved my life and the lives of my brothers." The grandchildren would sigh happily, loving the romance of it despite having heard variations of the story dozens of times. Samuel, now a prosperous rancher with children of his own, often brought his family to Sunday dinners at the original Fitzgerald cabin. He had never forgotten Quinn stepping into the father role when he needed it most, and their bond remained strong, despite Samuel being a grown man with responsibilities of his own. "You taught me what it means to be a man," Samuel told Quinn one afternoon as they sat on the porch, watching the younger grandchildren play in the yard. "Not just the practical skills, though those were important. You taught me about integrity, responsibility, protecting those weaker than yourself. About leading with both strength and compassion." Quinn clasped his adopted son's shoulder. "You were already a fine young man when I met you, Samuel. I just helped you develop what was already there. You're too modest. You changed my life and Jacob's and Tommy's, we all know it. We wouldn't be the men we are without your guidance." Jacob, now known as the best horse trainer in 3 counties, had built a successful business and a large family of his own. He still consulted Quinn on difficult animals, valuing his father's wisdom and calm approach. Tommy, true to his childhood dream, ran the school in Fort Benton and had written several books about Montana history that were used in classrooms throughout the territory. All 3 of the original Jenkins brothers made sure their children knew Quinn not just as a step-grandfather, but as the man who had saved their fathers and aunt when they were children, who had given them a future when they had none. The cabin's walls were covered with photographs now, a modern innovation that Quinn had initially resisted but Zelda loved. Images of their wedding day, stiff and formal but unable to hide their joy. Photos of each child and grandchild, family gatherings. Quinn and Zelda on various anniversaries, the progression of years visible but the love in their eyes constant. On their 25th anniversary, the entire extended family gathered for a massive celebration. Children, grandchildren, Old friends and neighbors filled every inch of the property. Tables groaned under the weight of contributed food. A small band played music for dancing. Speeches were made, toasting Quinn and Zelda's enduring love and the family they had built. Daniel, their youngest, now 23 and the spitting image of his father at that age, stood to offer his toast. My parents have taught all of us what love really means. Not just the romantic kind, though they certainly have that, but love as action, as choice, as commitment through good times and bad. They've shown us that family isn't just about blood. It's about who you choose to stand beside and who chooses to stand beside you. To Quinn and Zelda Fitzgerald, the best parents anyone could hope for. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Quinn pulled Zelda close and kissed her soundly, ignoring the whoops and catcalls from their children and grandchildren. Later, when most of the guests had departed and the remaining family had settled in for the night, Quinn and Zelda slipped away to their bedroom. They could hear the muffled sounds of their family all around them, children being tucked in, adults conversing quietly, the comfortable sounds of home. 25 years, Quinn marveled, helping Zelda with the buttons on her dress, his fingers still nimble despite his age. A quarter century since you made me the happiest man alive by agreeing to marry me. Best decision I ever made, Zelda said, turning in his arms once her dress was unfastened. Well, second best. The first was trusting you that night when you walked me home instead of turning me in. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had gone differently? If I had been cruel or indifferent? Zelda shuddered. I try not to. That was the worst period of my life, those months of struggling alone. I don't know if we would have survived another winter. The boys were already showing signs of malnutrition, and I was running out of options. She cupped his face in her hands. But I didn't have to find out because you were you, Quinn. Decent and compassionate and good. You gave us everything. They made love that night with the tenderness of long practice and deep familiarity, their bodies knowing each other as well as they knew the familiar landscape outside their windows. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they lay in contented silence. I want to tell you something, Quinn said eventually, something I've never properly articulated. Zelda shifted to look at him in the moonlight filtering through their window. What is it? Before I met you, I had convinced myself I was content with solitude. That I didn't need anyone, that my life was full enough with my trapping and hunting and occasional trips to town. But the truth is, I was lonely, Zelda. Deeply, achingly lonely, even if I wouldn't admit it to myself. I told myself I preferred isolation, but really I was just afraid. Afraid of letting someone in, afraid of being hurt, afraid of losing someone I loved like I lost my parents. He paused, gathering his thoughts. And then there you were, this fierce, desperate, beautiful woman trying to steal meat to feed her family. And something in me recognized something in you. Here was a person worth the risk, worth opening up for, worth loving. You broke through walls I didn't even realize I had built. Zelda's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Quinn, I need you to know that every day with you has been a gift. Every laugh, every conversation, every challenge we've faced together. You didn't just give me a family. You gave me myself back, the parts I had locked away after my parents died. You taught me it was safe to love again, safe to let people in. You healed me, Zelda, in ways I didn't even know I needed healing. You did the same for me, Zelda whispered. I was so lost, so terrified. I put on a brave face for the boys, but inside I was falling apart. You gave me strength, partnership, love. You reminded me I wasn't alone, that I didn't have to carry everything by myself. You've been my rock, my safe harbor, my home. They held each other as tears fell, happy tears mixed with the bittersweet awareness of time's passage. They were both in their 60s now, their time together more precious because they knew it was not infinite. But rather than dwelling on mortality, they chose to celebrate each day they were given. The years continued their steady march. Quinn and Zelda's silver anniversaries turned into their 30th, then their 35th. Grandchildren grew into adults and began having children of their own, making Quinn and Zelda great-grandparents. The family tree they had planted with their love continued branching outward, touching more lives with each generation. Fort Benton transformed around them, growing from a rough frontier town into a proper city with paved streets and electric lights. The Montana Territory achieved statehood in 1889, an event the Fitzgerald family celebrated with pride. The wild frontier of their youth was gradually tamed, though pockets of wilderness remained, preserved by people like Daniel who had inherited his father's love of untouched nature. Quinn's health remained remarkably good into his early 70s, though he finally conceded to letting Daniel take over the more strenuous aspects of managing the property. Zelda developed arthritis that made her hands ache, but she continued her gardening and sewing with determination, refusing to let age slow her down too much. They lost friends along the way, as everyone does who lives long enough. Reverend Martin, who had married them, passed away peacefully in his sleep at 87. Neighbors they had known for decades moved away or died. Each loss reminded them of their own mortality, but also reinforced their gratitude for the time they had been given. On their 40th anniversary, the celebration was smaller, more intimate. Just their immediate children, their spouses, and a few oldest grandchildren. Quinn's back ached more than it used to, and Zelda moved more slowly, but their joy in each other and their family remained undimmed. 40 years, Zelda marveled as they cut the cake Margaret had baked. Half my life spent as your wife, Quinn, the better half without question. The best half, Quinn agreed, kissing her temple, though I maintain all our years together have been good ones. Samuel stood to give the toast this time, his own hair gray now, his children grown. My parents, and yes, they've been my parents in every way that matters for over 40 years now, have given us all an example of what love should be. Constant, enduring, willing to weather any storm. They built this family from nothing, from desperate circumstances and uncertain futures, and turned it into something remarkable. We are all here because of their love, their choices, their commitment to each other and to us. He raised his glass, his voice thick with emotion. To Quinn and Zelda Fitzgerald, may you have many more years together, surrounded by the family you've built and the love you've created. As everyone toasted and cheered, Quinn pulled Zelda close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, right where it had fit perfectly for 4 decades. That night, alone again in their bedroom, they lay together and talked about the past and the future. "You have any regrets?" Zelda asked, a question they had posed to each other occasionally over the years. "None," Quinn answered without hesitation. "Every choice, every moment, every challenge, they all led us here. How could I regret any of it when the result is this life we've built? Even that first night, when you found me stealing and could have made a very different choice." Quinn turned to face her, his green eyes still bright despite his years. "Especially that night. That was the moment everything changed, the moment my real life began. Finding you in my smokehouse was the greatest blessing I've ever received, even if it didn't seem like it at first." Zelda smiled, her honey-colored eyes soft with love. "My brave, kind mountain man, you saved me that night and every day since." "We saved each other," Quinn corrected gently. "That's what love does. It saves us from loneliness, from despair, from living half a life." "You saved me just as surely as I saved you." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had for 40 years, grateful for another day together and hopeful for many more to come. Quinn lived to be 78 years old, remaining active and sharp until the very end. He passed away peacefully one autumn evening, sitting on the porch of the cabin he had built so many years ago, watching the sunset paint his beloved mountains gold. Zelda sat beside him, holding his hand, when he simply closed his eyes and slipped away, a small smile on his face. The grief that followed was profound but bearable, softened by the knowledge that they had been given 45 years together, far more than many couples received. The funeral brought together the vast family Quinn and Zelda had created, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathering to honor the man who had been the foundation of their family. Zelda scattered some of Quinn's ashes in the meadow where he had proposed, keeping the rest in an urn on the mantel of their cabin. She remained in their home, surrounded by memories and family, refusing her children's attempts to convince her to move in with one of them. "This is my home," she said firmly. "Quinn built it for us. This is where our life together unfolded. I'm staying here as long as I'm able." She lived 3 more years without him, still strong and sharp despite her grief. She spent her days tending her garden, reading the books from Quinn's collection, and welcoming the constant stream of family members who visited. She told stories about Quinn to the youngest great-grandchildren who had never met him, making sure they knew the kind of man their great-grandfather had been. On a spring morning, with wildflowers blooming in the meadow and the creek running high with snowmelt, Zelda Jenkins Fitzgerald passed away quietly in her sleep. She was 81 years old. Her family found her with a peaceful expression on her face, one hand resting on Quinn's pillow beside her, as if she had reached for him one last time. They buried her next to Quinn in the small family cemetery on the property, under a large pine tree with a view of the mountains. The headstone read, "Zelda Jenkins Fitzgerald, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, 1855–1936, and beside it, Quinn Fitzgerald, beloved husband, father, and grandfather, 1850–1928, the extended Fitzgerald family gathered after the funeral, filling the cabin one last time as a collective family before decisions had to be made about the property. Daniel, who had always loved the place best, bought out his siblings' shares and moved his own family into the home his parents had built. He preserved it carefully, making necessary updates but maintaining the essential character Quinn and Zelda had created. The story of how Quinn and Zelda met became family legend, passed down through generations. Great-grandchildren told their children about the mountain man who found a desperate young woman stealing from his smokehouse, and instead of punishing her, filled her arms with supplies and walked her safely home. About how that one act of compassion blossomed into a love story that spanned nearly 5 decades and created a family that now numbered in the dozens. The cabin still stands, maintained by Daniel's descendants, a testament to enduring love and the family it created. Visitors can still see Quinn's workshop where he carved furniture, Zelda's garden that continues to bloom each summer, the bedroom where they shared their lives. But more than the physical structure, Quinn and Zelda's legacy lived on in the values they instilled in their family. Compassion for those struggling, willingness to help without expecting anything in return, understanding that family is built through love and commitment, not just blood, the importance of partnership and standing beside someone through all of life's challenges. In a dusty photo album preserved carefully by the family, there is a picture taken on Quinn and Zelda's 40th anniversary. They sit close together on the porch of their cabin, his arm around her shoulders, her hand resting on his knee. They are both smiling at the camera, but the way they lean into each other speaks of decades of love and partnership. Their faces show the wear of time and weather, but their eyes shine with undimmed affection. On the back of the photo, in Zelda's careful handwriting, is a note. 40 years ago, I tried to steal from this man's smokehouse. Instead, I stole his heart and he stole mine. Best theft either of us ever committed. It was a fitting tribute to a love story that began with desperation and kindness in the Montana wilderness and grew into something that touched generations. Quinn and Zelda Fitzgerald proved that sometimes the greatest love stories start in the most unexpected ways, and that compassion and decency can change not just individual lives, but entire family legacies. Their story became a reminder that we never know when a single choice, a single moment of kindness, might alter the course of multiple lives forever. Quinn could have been cruel that evening. He could have been indifferent. Instead, he chose compassion, and that choice rippled forward through time, creating love and family and hope that extended far beyond his own lifetime. In the end, their story was simple. A mountain man found a woman stealing from his smokehouse. He filled her arms with supplies and walked her safely home. And in doing so, they both found their way home to each other, building a love that lasted a lifetime and a family that would endure for generations. It was a good story. It was a good life. And it all began on one cold evening in 1876, with an act of theft and an act of kindness that changed everything.